Everyone knows the Final Fantasy series is an absolute phenomenon. I mean, after all, it's one of the biggest and most important video game franchises ever, and it also has one of the largest and most passionate fan bases. So if you ask a Final Fantasy fan what their favorite game in the series is, you're bound to hear all sorts of answers, like 6, 7, 10, and so on. But one thing is for sure, you're never ever going to hear that question answered with Final Fantasy Mystic Quest. But let's face it, Final Fantasy Mystic Quest is the ugly duckling of the series. Instead of being a mainline entry, it was specifically designed to provide a simplified experience for an entry-level player, and that's exactly what it was at its core. But given those things, does it provide any value today, and is it really as bad as people say? I'll answer those questions and provide a full review of Final Fantasy Mystic Quest in this video. But before I get into that, please give this video a like and subscribe to my channel for more retro gaming content and reviews like this one. On the surface, Final Fantasy Mystic Quest looks almost exactly like Final Fantasy IV. The color schemes, sprites, and overhead view is every bit what you'd expect if you've played the previous Final Fantasy games, and all the visuals are totally in line with the early SNES era. Unlike the anime-style art from the Japanese box, the North American version depicts a European-style knight in a similar stance. And the Japanese version is actually called Final Fantasy USA Mystic Quest, perhaps a slight knock against the American audience that wasn't nearly as familiar with role-playing games. Although the game itself is something of a spin-off, Final Fantasy Mystic Quest features its own unique story, and does incorporate themes present in some of the other games in the franchise. The main character doesn't have a default name, and in the Japanese manual he's called, get this, protagonist. But established canon names him Benjamin. He's a young adventurer who learns that, wait for it now, he's the prophesized chosen one, and he needs to restore 4 elemental crystals. You do get a variety of companions throughout the adventure, but never more than one in addition to the main character. So you aren't building big parties, and there's honestly not much character development to speak of at all. This is not really like any of the other Final Fantasy games. Also, your weapons and armor are automatically replaced when you find new weapons and armor throughout the game. So you can think of it as an auto upgrade system of sorts, and that would definitely help new players. So does the story and upgrade system lack depth? Yeah, they sure do, but it wasn't like it was trying to be so complex. You kinda know what you're getting into with this one, but if you can accept that, it really isn't too bad. In fact, it adds some adventure game elements that aren't present in the other Final Fantasy games also. This is because when you're exploring dungeons, you can cycle through weapons with the L and R buttons to use them in various ways to help you. For instance, you can use the axe to smash through mushrooms that are blocking your path, and you can use the dragon claw as a grappling hook that allows you to cross over chasms. There aren't anywhere near as many items as in games like A Link to the Past, but it's a bit of an interesting twist nonetheless. Final Fantasy Mystic Quest actually does do a few more unique things too. For example, as you do damage to enemies, they become visibly weaker over time, and their sprites change to match the weakened state. And maybe that doesn't sound like much, but I can't think of any other SNES RPGs that did this offhand, and it was very innovative for the era. Given that the game is designed for RPG beginners, you might have guessed that it's pretty easy, right? Well, that's an understatement. This game is so simple that I can even see first-timers getting bored with it. I can see why they didn't want new players to be tested with super difficult fights and stuff like that, but I honestly think it just encourages those same new players to button mash rather than to think. This game is really short too, and can be beaten in 15 hours or so on a casual playthrough. The most redeeming part of Final Fantasy Mystic Quest is definitely the soundtrack. You might be surprised to know that Ryuji Sasai served as the composer rather than series legend Nobuo Uematsu, but the quality of these tracks is still very high. Several of them are ridiculously memorable, and the score blows most games from 1992 completely out of the water. There are only 27 songs, but that number still works well because the game is pretty short anyway, so you won't hear too much stuff being overused or repeated outside of the battle themes. So yeah, if you're a seasoned and experienced RPG fanatic, Final Fantasy Mystic Quest probably isn't the game for you. The story is dull, the gameplay is way too easy, and the item upgrade system doesn't give you the power to make any choices whatsoever. If you played all the great classics from the genre except for this one, you probably aren't missing much, but it's still part of the Final Fantasy legacy nevertheless. I'd recommend this game to players wanting an entry-level retro RPG, but that's it. But I want to hear from you because I want to know what you think about Final Fantasy Mystic Quest. Is it really as bad as people say? Let me know in the comments below. Please like, subscribe, and click the bell for more retro gaming content. I'd also like to give a shout out to my Patreon patrons and my YouTube members. So if you want early access to the videos I produce and other perks like they receive, please consider supporting the channel by becoming a Patreon patron or via the YouTube Join feature.